would you let your woman act that way? Like all this stuff. Because we're not objects. We are not meant to be controlled. There's a very fine line between respect and control. If you are beautiful and you have a man that's trying to hide you from the world, run. You need to run.
Narrative.
My wife declared she was tired of being controlled and too beautiful to be trapped in this house. Those were her exact words as I walked through our front door after a typical Tuesday at work. I hadn't even put my keys down when she launched into her tirade. She was standing in the living room, hands on her hips, looking like she'd been rehearsing this speech all day. "I'm done with this," she screamed. "You think you own me? You think you can tell me what to do, where to go, who to see?" I honestly had no idea what triggered this explosion. That morning, everything seemed normal. We had coffee together. I kissed her goodbye, told her I loved her. Standard routine we'd followed for 3 years of marriage. "What are you talking about?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Don't play dumb with me. Every time I want to go out with my friends, you ask 20 questions. Every time I wear something nice, you make comments. I'm tired of being controlled." The irony hit me immediately. This was the woman who questioned my every move, checked my phone regularly, and had opinions about every friend I hung out with. But apparently, asking where she was going when she stayed out until 2 in the morning made me controlling. "I asked where you're going because I care about you," I said calmly. "That's what married people do." "No," she shouted, her voice getting higher. "That's what controlling husbands do. I'm too beautiful to be trapped in this house like some prisoner." There it was, the entitlement that had been growing for months. She'd been spending more time on social media, comparing herself to influencers, talking about how she deserved better, how she was wasting her prime years. "You're not trapped anywhere," I replied. "You go out with your friends twice a week. That's not enough. I'm young, I'm attractive, and I deserve to live my life without some insecure man breathing down my neck." The insults were starting now. This conversation was heading somewhere ugly fast. She walked over to the coffee table and grabbed her wedding ring, yanking it off her finger with dramatic flair. "You know what? I'm done pretending this marriage works." She threw the ring at my feet. It bounced off the hardwood floor with a metallic ping. "I'm going out with the girls tonight, and don't even think about stopping me." I stared at the ring on the floor, then back at her flushed face. She was breathing heavily, clearly expecting me to beg, to argue, to chase after her and pick up the ring like some desperate fool. Instead, I started laughing. Not a happy laugh, but the kind of laugh you make when you finally understand a joke that's been told badly. "Something funny?" she demanded. "Actually, yeah." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own wedding ring. "You want to talk about being controlled? Here's what real freedom looks like." I walked over to the kitchen trash can and dropped my ring right in with the coffee grounds and banana peels. The sound it made hitting the bottom was satisfying. Her mouth fell open. This clearly wasn't part of her script. "There," I said, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Now we're both free. You can go out with your girls, and I can stop worrying about what my wife is doing when she's acting single. You can't just..." She stammered. "Can't what?" "Exercise my freedom. I thought that's what we were doing here." I grabbed a beer from the fridge and cracked it open. "You said you're too beautiful to be trapped. Well, congratulations. You're officially untrapped." The color drained from her face. She'd expected tears, begging, maybe even anger. She hadn't expected indifference. "I didn't mean..." She started. "Oh, you meant every word," I interrupted. "You're tired of being controlled. You're too good for this house. You want to live your life without an insecure husband." Message received loud and clear. She stood there for a moment, probably trying to figure out how to salvage her dramatic exit. But I'd already turned away, scrolling through my phone like she wasn't even there. "Fine," she finally exploded. "I'm leaving. Have fun," I called out without looking up. "Don't hurry back." She stormed upstairs, and I could hear her crashing around, probably throwing together some outfit that would prove how desirable she was to the world. 20 minutes later, she came clomping down the stairs in heels that were definitely not meant for walking. "This is your last chance to apologize," she announced from the doorway. I looked up from my phone and smiled. "For what? You got exactly what you asked for. Freedom." She waited another few seconds, clearly hoping I'd crack. When I went back to my phone, she slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. I listened to her car screech out of the driveway, then finished my beer in the sudden quiet of our house. She wanted to find out what real freedom looked like. I was more than happy to show her. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, I got to work. She thought throwing her ring on the floor was some grand gesture that would break me down. Instead, it was the clearest signal I'd ever received. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I walked upstairs to our bedroom and opened her closet. Designer dresses she'd bought with my credit card, shoes that cost more than most people's car payments, jewelry I'd given her for birthdays and anniversaries. All of it perfectly organized because she spent half her day arranging and rearranging her precious wardrobe. I grabbed a box of trash bags from the laundry room and got to work. Her clothes went in first. The little black dress she wore to her friend's wedding while complaining I looked too boring in my suit. The crop tops she insisted were fashionable when I mentioned they seemed inappropriate for a married woman. The jeans that were more holes than fabric. Each item that went into those bags represented a fight we'd had, a boundary she'd pushed, a line she'd crossed while calling me controlling for noticing. I wasn't angry anymore. I was systematic. Her makeup collection covered half the bathroom counter. Foundations, lipsticks, eyeshadow palettes, brushes that cost $40 each. Into the bags it went. Her perfumes, her hair products, her collection of face masks and scrubs that promised to keep her looking 25 forever. Bagged. The jewelry box on her dresser was next. Earrings, necklaces, bracelets, rings. Most of them gifts from me, given during happier times when I thought generosity would earn me respect. Now I understood that respect isn't something you can buy. While I worked, I thought about where she was probably headed. Downtown to that club where she and her friends went to dance and attract attention from men half their age. She'd probably spend an hour getting ready, taking selfies in different outfits, practicing her pouty face in the mirror. I could picture her right now, standing at the bar in some overpriced dress, waiting for men to notice her. Probably ordering those fruity drinks that cost $15 each and taste like candy. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd spent our entire relationship complaining that I didn't appreciate her beauty, that I didn't understand how attractive she was, how other men looked at her. Tonight she'd get to test that theory without a wedding ring to hold her back. I moved to her side of the bed, packing up her books, her phone charger, her collection of decorative pillows that served no purpose except to annoy me every night when I had to move them to actually sleep. Her exercise equipment came next. The yoga mats she used twice, the resistance bands still in their packaging, the workout clothes she bought but never wore because actually exercising was harder than just talking about it. By midnight, I had 12 trash bags lined up in the garage. 12 bags of a life she'd just walked away from without a second thought. I grabbed a beer and sat on the couch, looking around our house. It was quieter now, but not empty. Just clean, organized, peaceful. My phone buzzed with a text from her. Having the time of my life. This is what freedom feels like. I didn't respond. If she was having such a great time, she wouldn't need to tell me about it. Another text came an hour later. You have no idea what you've lost. Still didn't respond. People who are truly happy don't spend their night texting their ex-husband about how happy they are. I went to bed in a house that felt different already. Tomorrow would be interesting. She'd come home expecting to find me devastated, maybe crying into her pillow, ready to apologize and beg her to stay. Instead, she'd find out what freedom actually costs. I slept better that night than I had in months. No complaining about the temperature, no tossing and turning, no passive-aggressive sighs when I moved. Just silence and space and the satisfaction of knowing I'd chosen self-respect over desperation. She wanted to discover what it felt like to be free. I was about to show her there's a difference between freedom and abandonment. I woke up at 6 in the morning and immediately got back to work. The 12 trash bags in the garage were just the beginning. She had more stuff scattered throughout the house than I'd realized. Her yoga DVDs that promised quick results with minimal effort. Her collection of self-help books about finding your inner goddess. Her essential oils that were supposed to cure everything from headaches to spiritual emptiness. All of it went into bags. I dragged the bags out to the curb, one by one, arranging them neatly on the sidewalk like it was garbage day. Which, in a way, it was. Next came the technical preparations. Our front door had a digital lock that she'd insisted we install last year because it was more secure. She was right about that. I changed the master code and deleted her fingerprint from the system entirely. The garage door was easier. I simply reprogrammed it to reject her remote. She'd used that garage door opener like it was her personal entrance to a hotel she didn't have to pay for. While I worked, I thought about last night. She'd been texting me updates on her amazing time until almost 3 in the morning, each message more desperate than the last, fishing for a response that never came. The final text had been different though. Maybe we should talk when I get home. That's when I knew her night hadn't gone according to plan. I remembered the early days of our marriage when she'd come home from girls' nights genuinely happy, telling me stories about dancing and laughing with her friends. But lately, those nights out had become something else entirely. They weren't about friendship anymore. They were about validation, about proving something to herself and the world. Last night was probably her first real test of that theory. I finished the technical work and stood in our driveway, looking at the bags lined up like a yard sale nobody wanted to attend. 3 years of marriage reduced to garbage bags on a curb. My neighbor from across the street was getting his newspaper and gave me a curious look. I waved and went back inside. The house felt completely different now. Not just quieter, but lighter somehow. I'd been carrying the weight of her constant dissatisfaction for months without realizing it. Every complaint about being trapped, every accusation of being controlled, every dramatic outburst about deserving better. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, thinking about the patterns I'd been ignoring. She'd started this "I'm too beautiful to be controlled" narrative about 6 months ago. It began after she joined some online group of women who spent their time convincing each other that any boundary in a marriage was oppression. I tried to engage with it reasonably at first, asked her what she needed, what would make her feel more supported, how we could work together. Every attempt at conversation became an argument about my character flaws. The truth was, I hadn't been controlling her. I'd been enabling her. When she wanted to spend $300 on a single dress, I said yes to avoid a fight. When she stayed out until 2 in the morning without calling, I stayed awake worrying instead of setting boundaries. When she disrespected me in front of friends, I let it slide to keep the peace. That wasn't love. That was weakness masquerading as compromise. My phone buzzed. Another text. "I'm coming home. We need to talk." I looked at the timestamp. 4:30 in the morning. Her night of freedom had apparently ended early. I didn't respond to that one either. Instead, I showered, got dressed, and prepared for my normal workday routine. I had meetings starting at 9, a project deadline that needed attention, responsibilities that didn't disappear just because my wife had decided to have a midlife crisis. By 7:30, I was ready to leave for the office. The bags were on the curb, the house was secure, and my conscience was clear. She wanted to find out what it felt like to be free from a controlling husband. In about 20 minutes, when her Uber dropped her off at a house she could no longer enter, she'd discover that freedom comes with consequences she hadn't considered. The best part was, I wouldn't even be here to watch her realize it. I'd be at work, handling my business like a man who had his priorities straight. She could figure out her new freedom on her own time. I was halfway through my morning routine when my phone started buzzing nonstop. Text after text, each one more frantic than the last. "What did you do? Why are my clothes on the street? Answer your phone." I ignored them all and finished my coffee. 20 minutes later, I was backing out of the garage when I saw her. She was standing on our sidewalk in last night's club dress and heels, hair disheveled, makeup smeared, staring at the trash bags like she was seeing ghosts. But that wasn't the best part. The best part was the homeless guy who'd apparently discovered her designer wardrobe before she did. He was sitting cross-legged on our neighbor's lawn, wearing her favorite black leggings and one of her oversized sweaters, casually going through another bag like it was Christmas morning. She spotted him just as I pulled into the street. I watched in my rearview mirror as she stumbled over in those ridiculous heels, still drunk from whatever cocktails had failed to attract the attention she'd been seeking. "Hey, Itchy Y," she screamed at the guy. "Those are my clothes." The homeless man looked up at her with genuine confusion, then gestured to the bags. "Lady, this stuff was on the curb. That means it's trash." "It's not trash. It's mine." "Then why was it in garbage bags on the street?" Even a homeless guy understood basic logic better than she did. I could see her gesturing wildly, trying to explain something that made no sense. How do you tell someone that your husband put your belongings on the curb without admitting that your husband no longer wanted you in his house? I parked across the street and rolled down my window, curious to see how this would play out. She gave up arguing with the homeless guy and stumbled toward our front door, fishing in her purse for keys she wouldn't need anymore. I watched her press her thumb to the digital lock panel, Wait for the green light that would never come. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. Then she started typing in the code we'd used for 2 years. The panel flashed red and beeped disapprovingly. That's when the panic really set in. She ran to the garage, pulling out the remote from her purse and pressing it repeatedly like it was broken. The door stayed firmly closed. What the hell? She shouted to no one in particular. She tried the digital lock again, pressing her thumb harder like that would somehow make it recognize her. When that failed, she started pounding on the door with her fists. Open this door. This is my house too. The neighbors were starting to notice. Mrs. Patterson from next door came out to get her newspaper and stared openly at the spectacle. The guy walking his dog across the street slowed down to watch. My wife, who'd spent the previous evening talking about how beautiful and desirable she was, now looked like exactly what she'd become. A drunk woman locked out of her own house, screaming at a door that wouldn't open. She turned around and saw me sitting in my car. The relief on her face was immediate. She stumbled over, still wearing one heel because she'd apparently lost the other one somewhere during her night of freedom. Thank God you're here, she panted, leaning against my car window. Something's wrong with the locks. I can't get in. The smell of alcohol and desperation was overwhelming. Nothing's wrong with the locks, I said calmly. They're working exactly as intended. It took her a moment to process that. What do you mean? I mean you wanted freedom. Congratulations. You're free. You can't lock me out of my own house. Actually, it's my house. My name on the mortgage, my credit that qualified for the loan, my paycheck that makes the payments. You just lived here. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The homeless guy was still sitting on the neighbor's lawn, now wearing her designer jacket and eating what looked like a protein bar from her gym bag. You can't do this, she whispered. I'm not doing anything, I replied. You threw your wedding ring on the floor and announced you were done with this marriage. I simply took you at your word. She stared at me, probably trying to figure out how her dramatic exit had turned into this nightmare. I was angry, she said finally. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. You meant every word. You said you were tired of being controlled, tired of being trapped, tired of having a husband who asked questions. Well, problem solved. I started the car. I have to get to work. You might want to call one of those friends you went out with last night. I'm sure they'll be happy to help. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know about how her night of freedom had actually gone. I didn't drive away immediately. Something told me this conversation wasn't over, and I was right. She followed my car as I slowly pulled forward, limping on one heel and gesturing frantically for me to stop. Wait. Please, just wait, she called out, her voice cracking. I stopped the car and rolled the window down halfway. Not enough to seem welcoming, just enough to hear whatever desperate pitch she was about to make. Look, I know I said some things last night, she began, trying to catch her breath. But this is crazy. You can't just throw me out over one argument. One argument. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. This wasn't one argument. This was the final argument. The one where you made it crystal clear what you think of me and this marriage. I was drunk when I said those things. No, you were honest. Alcohol doesn't create feelings. It just removes the filter that usually hides them. She leaned closer to the window, and I could see the mascara streaked down her cheeks. Last night's makeup that was supposed to make her irresistible to all those men who apparently hadn't noticed her. Okay, fine. I was horrible last night. I admit it. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can figure this out. We. I shook my head. There is no we anymore. You ended we when you threw your ring at my feet and told me you were tired of being trapped. I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? Because from where I was standing, it sounded like you meant exactly what you said. She was getting desperate now, grabbing at the window frame like she could physically prevent me from leaving. What about our vows? What about for better or worse? What about till death do us part? The audacity was breathtaking. You're really going to lecture me about marriage vows? You, who spent last night announcing to anyone who would listen that you were done with this marriage. I was angry. No, you were revealing. There's a difference. I could see her trying to formulate another argument, another angle to manipulate her way back into the house she'd just rejected. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, switching to the victim approach. I don't know. Maybe ask one of those friends who took you out last night to celebrate your freedom. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to help you enjoy your new single life. Her face flushed red. They were busy. They had to leave early. Oh, I nodded knowingly. So the women who convinced you that marriage was a prison couldn't stick around to help you celebrate your jailbreak? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Let me guess, I continued. The night didn't go quite like you planned. All those men who were supposed to be falling over themselves to get your attention were somehow busy looking elsewhere. The way she flinched told me I'd hit the mark. Here's what's going to happen, I said, putting the car in drive. I'm going to work, like I do every day, because I have responsibilities and commitments that don't disappear just because someone in my life decides to have a tantrum. You're going to figure out your new life, because that's what adults do when they make adult decisions. You can't just abandon me. I'm not abandoning you. You abandoned us. I'm just accepting your decision and moving on. The divorce papers haven't been filed yet, she said desperately. We're still married. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, handing it to her through the window. Actually, they were filed this morning. Congratulations on your freedom. She stared at the envelope like it might bite her. You already filed? I called my lawyer at 6 a.m. Turns out when you have a clear case of abandonment and a witness-filled public declaration that the marriage is over, the paperwork moves pretty quickly. Her hands were shaking as she held the envelope. I never abandoned anything. Really? Because throwing your wedding ring at your husband and storming out to go party with single women sounds like textbook abandonment to me. She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't finished. You know what the best part is? You did all the hard work for me. You declared the marriage over in front of witnesses. You removed your wedding ring and threw it away. You announced you were tired of being married to me. My lawyer said it's the clearest case he's seen in years. I started rolling the window back up. Enjoy your freedom. You earned it. As I drove away, I could see her in my rearview mirror, standing in the street holding the divorce papers, finally understanding that actions have consequences. The homeless guy waved at me from the lawn, still wearing her designer outfit. At least someone was having a good morning. 3 weeks later, I was living a completely different life. The divorce went through faster than anyone expected. When you have documented evidence of someone publicly ending their marriage and abandoning the home, courts don't waste time on lengthy proceedings. She tried everything in those 3 weeks. The crying phase lasted about 4 days, with voicemails that started angry and ended desperate. When I didn't respond to those, she moved to the bargaining phase, promising she'd change, that she'd learned her lesson, that she understood now how good she had it. Then came the threats. She was going to take half of everything. She was going to ruin my reputation. She was going to make sure everyone knew what kind of man I really was. The problem with threats is they only work if the person you're threatening cares about your opinion. I'd stopped caring about her opinion the moment she threw her ring at my feet. My lawyer handled everything with professional efficiency. She got what the law required. Nothing more, nothing less. The house stayed mine since my name was on the mortgage, and she'd legally abandoned it. Her car, her personal belongings, half of our savings account. Fair and final. The funniest part was watching her scramble to find somewhere to live. Those friends who'd encouraged her to embrace her freedom suddenly had very busy schedules when she needed actual help. Turns out it's easier to tear down someone else's marriage than it is to deal with the aftermath. She ended up moving in with her sister, who called me twice to complain about the situation. I listened politely and hung up. Not my problem anymore. Work became more enjoyable. I'd forgotten what it felt like to leave the office without dreading what mood I'd find at home. No more walking on eggshells, wondering what innocent comment would trigger the next accusation of being controlling. My friends noticed the change immediately. I started accepting invitations I'd been declining for months because she didn't like my buddies or thought they were a bad influence. Turns out hanging out with other men who respect themselves makes you remember who you are. The best part was the silence. No constant complaints about feeling trapped, no daily lectures about what I was doing wrong, no dramatic announcements about deserving better. Just peace. She tried one last manipulation about a month after everything was finalized. Showed up at my office looking put together, claiming she'd done some soul-searching and wanted to apologize properly. I realize now that you weren't controlling, she said, sitting across from my desk like we were conducting business. I was just scared of commitment, scared of being truly happy. I want to make this right. I listened to her whole speech without interrupting. When she finished, I leaned back in my chair and smiled. I appreciate the apology, I said, but you're about 6 months too late. What do you mean? I mean I've moved on. Completely. You taught me something valuable about self-respect, and I'm grateful for that lesson. But the tuition was our marriage, and I'm not interested in repeating the class. She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. In her mind, she was the prize that men fought over. The idea that someone would choose to walk away permanently didn't compute. "You're seeing someone else," she said, making it sound like an accusation. "That's none of your business anymore." But for the record, yes. I'm dating someone who appreciates what she has instead of constantly complaining about what she deserves. The look on her face was priceless. She'd expected me to be waiting around, grateful for whatever crumbs of attention she might throw my way. "She won't treat you as well as I did," she said desperately. "She already treats me better than you ever did. She says thank you when I do something nice. She doesn't throw tantrums when I ask reasonable questions. She doesn't threaten to leave every time we disagree." Imagine that. She left my office that day understanding finally that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. 6 months later, I ran into her at Target. She was with some guy who looked like he'd given up on life about a decade ago. She saw me first and tried to duck into another aisle, but it was too late. "Hey," she said awkwardly when I walked by their cart. "Hey yourself." I nodded politely at her companion, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. She looked tired. Not just physically tired, but tired in that deep way that comes from realizing you've made irreversible mistakes. "How are you?" she asked. "Great. Really great. How about you?" "I'm fine. Happy." But her eyes told a different story. She'd gotten her freedom, all right. Freedom from security, freedom from respect, freedom from being loved by someone who actually cared about her well-being. "Well," I said, "I hope things work out for you." I'm in it too. Not because I wanted her back, but because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to get sick. As I walked away, I heard her boyfriend ask, "Who was that?" "Nobody important," she replied. She was right about that much. To her, I wasn't important anymore. But more importantly, she wasn't important to me either. That's what real freedom looks like. Not the freedom to act without consequences, but the freedom that comes from choosing self-respect over desperation, boundaries over enabling, and truth over comfortable lies. She'd wanted to find out what life looked like without a man who loved her. I'd shown her exactly that. Now we both knew.